Here's a question that should bother you more than it does. What if the most generous thing the world has ever done for Africa is also the thing holding it back the most? In 6 decades, the world has transferred more than $1.2 trillion into the African continent. That's enough money to dwarf the entire economies of Spain, Australia, or South Korea. And yet today, more Africans live in poverty than when the money started flowing. The gap between the average African income and the average Western income has not shrunk. It has more than doubled. Something is not working. And the uncomfortable answer, the one that challenges everything the charity campaigns told us, is that the money itself might be the problem. Let's trace this from the beginning. After the Second World War, Europe was destroyed. Factories gone, infrastructure in rubble. So in 1948, the United States launched the most famous economic intervention in modern history, the Marshall Plan. $13 billion pumped into 16 European nations over 4 years. The result was remarkable. GDP per capita across the region grew nearly 35%. For the West, this was proof of a beautiful idea. Money fixes poverty. Find a poor place, send funds, watch it grow. So in the 1960s, the world turned its attention to Africa, a continent reeling from colonial extraction. The conditions looked similar to post-war Europe. The solution seemed obvious. Send the money, and they did. Sub-Saharan Africa received $500 million a year in aid in the 1960s. By the 1990s, that number had grown 40 times to nearly $20 billion annually. But something strange was happening. The more money flowed in, the worse things got. Between 1970 and 2000, the average income in sub-Saharan Africa actually declined, despite receiving nearly $600 billion. When the aid programs began, only 11% of Africans lived in extreme poverty. After decades of escalating donations, that number had climbed to 66%. The world noticed the numbers were wrong, and then did exactly the wrong thing in response. It doubled down. By 2010, aid flows reached over $50 billion a year. Yet today, 400 million Africans still live on less than $2 a day. So why did the same strategy that rebuilt Europe completely fail in Africa? The answer sits in one word that economists use and most people ignore: institutions. When the Marshall Plan arrived in Western Europe, it landed on top of existing frameworks: legal systems, tax collection, courts, property rights. Money poured into a functioning institutional framework gets directed, distributed, and multiplied. Africa's situation was categorically different. Most nations had just gained independence from colonial administrations designed for extraction, not development. And, suddenly, billions of dollars were being poured into those same structures. When a government funds itself through taxes, it's accountable to its citizens. But when a government funds itself through foreign donors, that accountability relationship disappears. The citizen is not the customer, is the result. Aid money for roads and hospitals quietly redirects toward presidential jets and ministerial luxury cars. Estimates suggest the continent loses around $30 billion every year to corruption. But it gets more subtle and more damaging. Beyond corruption, aid actively dismantles the economic engine every successful developing nation has used to grow. Export-led growth: produce low-cost goods, sell them to the world, use the income to industrialize. A key part of that playbook is a competitive currency. A weaker currency makes your exports cheaper. Aid breaks this cycle. When billions of foreign dollars flow into a country, they must be converted to local currency. That drives up demand for the local currency, making it more expensive. That makes the country's exports more expensive. The export-led growth model becomes impossible. Then there's the direct competition problem. When aid organizations deliver clothing, food, and supplies, they often compete directly with local businesses. In Ghana, between 1990 and 2010, over 80% of domestic textile factories shut down. Thousands of jobs gone, and with them, the industrial capacity for a homegrown manufacturing sector. Even the delivery itself is broken. A 2012 analysis found that up to 70% of aid projects either missed their targets or produced no measurable impact. Why? Aid organizations are not accountable to the people they serve. In a normal market, if a business provides a bad product, customers leave and the business fails. Aid has no such feedback loop. So what does actually work? Look at the countries that have made the fastest progress in Africa. The common thread isn't aid, it's institutional improvement, rule of law, property rights, and accountability between governments and their own citizens. Aid isn't useless. In genuine emergencies like famines or earthquakes, short-term relief saves lives. But as a long-term development strategy, the evidence is difficult to argue with. $1.2 trillion later, and the gap keeps growing. The real question isn't how much more money to send, it's what conditions turn capital into growth. Because without those, the money doesn't fix poverty. It funds the people managing it. If this shifted something in how you think about the world, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.